Welcome back to our Intro to SolidWorks video series. In this video, we're going to go over using equations and introduce you to design tables in SolidWorks. So we've already looked at equations in a brief introduction, and now we're going to go a little more in depth of an example of how to use equations to define how a part is created. This gets to the heart of what we talked about parametric modeling, right? That each parameter is something that SolidWorks stores basically as a database. And up until now, we've defined each of those parameters independently. We would dimension, let's go take a look at this sketch, for example. So we set our dimension to be 120 millimeters for the width of this base and 70 millimeters for the height of it. And those are each parameters that we defined as a fixed value. In our intro to equations, we've shown how we can tie those to be related to each other. So let's go ahead and start redesigning or re-editing this part so that all of the dimensions related to the width and height of the part are based on just the width, that 120 millimeter. So right now, if we go in and look at this sketch, we can see that the 70 millimeter is its own independent dimension. So let's edit that so that it is tied proportionally to the 120. So in this case, the equation for that would be, we start out with the equal sign just like in Excel. So it's going to be equal to this dimension divided by 2, that would get us 60 millimeters, and then plus 10, that would get us the 70, right? So I'll hit enter. Hit enter once, it verifies that it can understand what I meant in my equation, and if I hit it again, it updates. And now we can see that there's the sum sign in front of that. And so let's go ahead and rebuild, and let's edit and see what happens if I update the 120. So let's say, let's go to 200. And yeah, it updated to 110, but you can see I'm going to have to do some working on my definition for my fins, because while I've made the base plate bigger, the fins didn't follow that. So let's take a look at where we defined our fins. And this could vary if I had done the fin as a linear feature pattern or as a linear sketch pattern. And looking at my feature tree over here, I must have done it as a sketch pattern because I don't see any linear feature pattern symbol down here. So let's see, is it this one? Nope, that's where I do the tabs. So there it is. So let's look at the sketch, edit the sketch for this one. Okay, so here there's a couple different dimensions that I'll need to edit. The first one is, if you see this number 20 here, that is the number of fins that's created. So I'm going to need that to update based on an equation as well. So each of the fins, it's a total of 6 millimeter spacing, right? From the edge of one fin to the edge of the next one. So rather than having this as a fixed 20, I'm going to edit it because it is just another dimension. I'm going to say equals, do it as an equation, and then I'm going to get to where I can select that base plate. So there's my what's 200 right now. So it's going to be equal to 200 and then divided by 6 millimeters per fin. Okay, and so that updated. So let's take a look at what that rebuilt looks like. Okay, so now I have a good number of fins, it looks like, but you can see they're not centered quite correctly because I have, let's see, switch to millimeters. Okay, so I have 1.5 millimeters gap on that side of the plate, and on this side I have 3.5. So I need to edit the spacing on that first fin so that it always updates as well. So let's go take a look at that same sketch again. Okay, so right now that dimension, that spacing is set. Okay, here it is. It's 1.5 millimeters from the edge. So let's think about how I can redo that one. So I want it to be equal to, let's say, my overall, the full width of the plate. So let's get that dimension again. So there's the 200. And then it's going to be minus, oh, I need to do that, equal 200 and not equal to 200. So see there, I accidentally just selected the dimension rather than putting the equals in first. And so it just took the 200. So equal to my sketch. There we go. That's what I wanted. And then minus, and here it's going to be minus the number of fins, so that's my 33 there, if I can get to where I can select that, yep. And that was times 6. Okay, so that would give me all of the width of all of the fins added together. And then I'm going to put parentheses around that much because I want it to do all those order of operations first. And then I'm going to divide the amount that's left by 2. So use parentheses to make things happen in order of operations just like in Excel. Then I'll hit enter once to see if it accepts that. Yeah, it says that's okay. And let's look at how that turns out. So my gap there is 1 millimeter, so I still have something a little wrong, it looks like, because I have more down here. Let's think about why that would be. So let's go back in. I think I'm off by the width of one of my fins, basically. So let's do that again. -3. Oh, that went the wrong direction, so maybe I'm meeting it +3. That looks better. Okay, so let's let that rebuild. Okay, that looks better center. So again, let's see how it updates if we go back to our 120. Are things still centered? Yep, looks good. Let's try different. Let's try something weird. 130. Ooh, 1300. That's going to get really big. Yeah, but it looks like it worked correctly. So, okay, let's go back to our original 120. So now I have a model that is completely defined based on this. Well, not completely. All of the X and Y basically are defined based on that 120 dimension. Let's edit the height of the fins as well. Let's make them scale. So right now, that's the feature definition here. Let's look at what they are. They're extruded up, looks like 40 millimeters. So that's 1/3 of the base height, right? So let's change that from, instead of being 40 millimeters, let's do that as an equation as well. So it's going to be equal to, and then let's get to where I can select that original sketch again. Okay, it's not let me get to that. Oops, that went the wrong way. Okay, so it's not letting me select for some reason. About that. So this is a good example of how, if I can't get it to show up to select it, I can always do it by name. So let's go back and look at that sketch again. And that dimension, if I double click on it, that's dimension. Looks like that's actually dimension 2. Double click it. Yeah, dimension 2 at sketch 1. So I'm just going to copy that text over here from the properties and rebuild that and go back to where I'm trying to edit. I'm working on editing the feature here. Okay, and so here I'm going to say it's equal to, and then I'm going to paste the name of the dimension that I want, D2 at sketch 1, and I have to put that in quotes for it to recognize it. So let's put quotes around that. Okay, it turned blue so it recognizes it, and then divided by 3. Okay, and let's see how that works. Okay, so that made them, they should still be at 40 millimeters. And just as a reminder, if I want to go and see what that dimension divided by 3 equaled out to, I can always go and look at my manage equations. And so that's the 40 millimeters right here. Okay, so now let's scale the whole thing again by my sketch 1. Let's go to 200. And the base plate scaled, the fins are still centered, and there's the right number. And now my height, you can see, is quite a bit taller. You can tell that because they're coming to a finer point at the end, and they're a fixed 1-degree draft. We can look at how tall they are now. If we're at 200, so it should be 200 divided by 3, so a little under 70 millimeters. And let's look and see what came out at. 66.66 repeating millimeters. Yeah. Okay, so now we have this model that's basically able to be adjusted in all parameters based on that one dimension using equations. And you may remember we've done a similar model previously when we were looking at configurations. let's look at how we can add configurations now in a automated way instead of going in. If you remember before, when we wanted to create a configuration, we came over to configurations, added a configuration. So let's just say test configuration for now. And then I could edit one dimension at a time for each configuration. So I could highlight this and I could right click on the dimension and say configure dimension, right? And so then that would just let me edit dimension 2 of sketch 1. And if I wanted to edit or configure a different dimension, I would click on that one, etc. There's actually a way we can create configurations automatically. So let's get rid of that test configuration. So we can create a configuration that includes all of the dimensions in a table that we can then edit. So how we do that is we have our part open. I'll go ahead and save my part just so that all my equations are saved in there. And then I'm going to go to Insert and Tables and Design Table. And so what a design table is, it's basically an Excel spreadsheet that includes a value for every dimension you have in your model. And most of these you can leave as just default. I'm going to auto create my design table. And here are two important ones. I can say allow model edits to update the design table or block model edits. And usually what you want to do is you want to get your model all defined for one configuration with all your equations functioning how you want. And then you're going to say block model edits so it update the design table. Because what we want now is we're going to make all our edits to our part from the design table, not in the part itself. So I'll show you how that works here in a minute, but I'm just letting you know that I'm going to say block model edit so it update the design table for now. Then you say OK, and it's next going to ask you, okay, what dimensions do you want to include in the design table? And if there's just some subset that you want, you would select those. But I want to have access to all of them in this case. So I'm going to just shift and select all of them. And you'll see it's creating my design table right now, and it opens it in a window within my SolidWorks interface here. So you can see if I scroll to the left, there's a column for every dimension in my part. Both for each sketch, you can see these first two are for sketch 1. Then this is the definition for extrude 1. That's the thickness of my base plate. And then there's a couple of the dimensions in here for sketch 3, etc. So you can see some of the values for those dimensions are fixed. Those are ones where I didn't edit them via equations, and some of them are equations. So you can see these different ones that are represented by equations that I've already added in there. Important thing to note here, the first column of the design table is the name of the configuration. So this part only has one configuration in it called 70 millimeters. Let's go ahead and create a couple more. I'll call them well, let's do 110 millimeters. Oops, sorry. Let's create one called 110. It's not letting me edit right now, so I'm going to, looks like my SolidWorks is locked up. Give me a second here. I'm going to exit my design table and then go back to it. And you can always get back to your design table by going into configurations, and now you'll see there's this folder for tables. And I'm going to right click on my design table, and you can open it two ways. If you do edit table, it opens it in SolidWorks like it was, but I kind of think that gets crowded. So I'm going to edit table in new window, and SolidWorks just opens an Excel window then with the design table in it. And that way I can switch back and forth what I'm looking at. Okay, so here's my design table. I'm going to go ahead and add another configuration by just typing in here the name of the new configuration, 90 millimeters, and then let's create one 110 millimeters. And let's create our 200 millimeter one as well. Okay, then, oops, 200 meters, that's kind of big. So now I'm going to select all of the values from the default configuration, and you can just copy those and paste them down if you want to. Another way you can do that is select the one you want to copy and bring down, and then do Control D. That just fills them down. So now you can see that all my configurations would be the same. And let's just close my design table and go back and look at the part before I edit anything. And you can see SolidWorks is telling me, okay, you updated the design table, so I'm creating these 3 new configurations. And so you can see it did that. But if we look at the configurations, nothing's actually changed, right? They're all based on that original one. Okay, so you can say rebuild, that's fine. So let's go back and look at the design table again. And let's edit some of those values. Oh, actually, I'm going to cancel that once it opens. Let me show you what we can't do anymore. Well, now that we're here in the design table, we'll make our edits here and then go back. So this one's 200. This one we'll say is 110. This one is 90. And this one will make 70. Okay, and then I'm going to close my design table. And you'll see that everything is going to update. So the 70 looks like it's too small. My geometry didn't scale right. So there's a 110 millimeter version, a 90 millimeter version, and the 110 and 200. And that's fine. Okay, so if we go back to our feature tree now, and if I come in here and I want to edit that original sketch, let's edit the sketch. Look at what color the dimensions are now. They're like this fuchsia color. And if I try to double click on one and edit it, it says you're attempting to change a field that's currently locked by a design table. So this comes back to that setting that I showed you when we were creating the design table. So basically I've said that now if I want to edit any of those dimensions, I need to edit it from the design table. I can't do it here. So let's go back and look at that again. Let's look at editing something in the design table. So for example, one of the dimensions that I haven't created an equation for, but is now locked, is the thickness of that base plate. And so that's this thickness here, that's dimension 1 for my extrude for the base. So let's go ahead and edit one of those here. Let's say this, let's say 3 millimeters, 4 millimeters, and 5 millimeters. Edit those and come back. So you can see now I'm in the 200 millimeter version, so this thickness here is going to be 5 millimeters. And if I switch to the 110, I think I set that one to be 4. Yep, and if I switch to the 90, then it's going to be 3. So that's showing how I could edit those non-equation dimensions in my design table. And if I come back and look at that dimension is the definition for this extrude here. If I try to edit it here and update it, it updated there, but not in the sketch, if that makes sense. So we'll go back to the 3. Okay, and if I want to change that so that I can edit all my dimensions from either the design table or from, oops, that's not where I want to go, from either in the design table or from within my feature tree. I'll cancel out of this here once it opens and show you. Okay, close my design table. That's not where I wanted to go. And right click on it and click Edit Feature. This is where I can change it to where allow the model edits to update the design table. So now if I come back over here and look at this sketch, I'll be able to edit that dimension directly. So I can put in here, I could say 150, and it will all update. And if I go back and look at my design table now, that will show 150 because I've now allowed it to edit either from the design table or from the feature tree. So I think that's everything I want to cover for design tables. You can see these are a really powerful tool, kind of getting into the heart of parametric modeling. Very similar to configurations, right? It's creating configurations, but now instead of you manually editing dimensions from within a configuration, you can edit every dimension for every configuration from one spreadsheet. And you can create equations within the spreadsheet that adjust each dimension however you want. So again, that just kind of starting with equations and then taking those equations into a design table. And I guess that's one last thing to look at. If you remember back in the feature manager, when we were doing just intro to equations, if we look at manage equations, this still shows all of our equations, right, in relationship to each other. But up here in the corner, if you have multiple configurations, this is how you look at each of those different equations and what its value is for that particular configuration. Okay, that's all for this video, covering a little bit more in equations and introducing you to design tables. Look forward to seeing you next time.